Winter, 1872. Wyoming Territory. The snow fell like ash, silent, endless, and unrelenting. Clara Dobbins tightened her frozen fingers around the iron trigger of her father's rifle. Her breath came in ragged clouds. Somewhere behind them, hoofbeats echoed off the canyon walls. "Don't stop," Clara hissed, glancing back at her sisters. Beth's skirts were soaked, dragging through knee-deep snow. Lucy limped, her hand clutching her side, her face pale as death. "They're close," Beth whispered. Clara didn't answer. She already knew. Hours ago they'd had a wagon, a father, a fire. Now it was gone, all of it, burned. Their fathers. Blood turned the snow black near the river bend. The ambush had come fast. Arrows, war cries, gunshots, horses scattered. Their mother died months ago on the trail west, leaving Clara as the one who had to be strong. 23 and already more weathered than most men twice her age. Clara had screamed for Lucy to run, had dragged Beth from beneath their overturned wagon. The air had smelled like fire and fear. Now they ran. Still, they crested a frozen ridge, boots crunching over the brittle crust of ice. Below them, smoke curled lazily from the valley. Not settler smoke. No chimney. No walls. Hide tents. Circular. Dozens of them. "Clara," Lucy's voice wavered. "There's no way out." She was right. The land dropped into the valley like a basin. Trees thickened to the north, cliffs to the west. East was the way they'd come. Trapped. A shrill whistle pierced the air. Clara spun. Too late. 5 riders emerged from the trees behind them, silent, as if the forest had given birth to them. Their faces were streaked with ash and ochre, eyes unreadable beneath furred hoods and feathers. Each one carried a spear or bow, but it was the one in the center, tall, broad-shouldered, with a wolf pelt draped over his shoulders, who made Clara's blood turn to ice. He didn't raise his voice, just lifted a hand, palm open. A command. "Run," Clara snapped, already knowing it was useless. Beth didn't move. Lucy crumpled to her knees. The riders closed in like wraiths. Clara raised the rifle, hands shaking. She had one shot, just one. Her finger curled around the trigger, a blur of motion. Something struck her arm. A stone? A stick? Her arm went numb. The rifle dropped, vanishing into the snow. A second later, a rider leapt from his horse and slammed into her, knocking her down. She tasted blood. She kicked. Clawed. A guttural voice barked something in Cheyenne. The men stopped. The one with the wolf pelt stepped forward. He studied Clara, then Beth, then Lucy. His expression unreadable. Clara spat at his feet. He said something sharp in his tongue. The man who had tackled her seized her arms. Another hoisted Beth. Lucy was lifted like a doll, eyes wide with silent terror. As they were pulled down the slope toward the camp, Clara's mind screamed, "Think, think." Their captor's camp sat between frozen streams, half buried in snowdrifts. Dozens of Cheyenne moved like shadows, women feeding fires, children wrapped in buffalo hides. No one looked surprised to see 3 bloodied white girls dragged in. They were shoved into a hide tent. Dark, musty, the floor layered with pine branches and bear pelts. Outside, horses whinnied. Drums thudded softly. The tent flap closed. Darkness swallowed them. Beth sobbed silently. Clara crawled to the edge and tested the seams of the tent. Raw hide. Tightly stitched. Lucy spoke for the first time in hours. "Why didn't they kill us?" Clara didn't answer. Because she didn't know. A figure ducked into the tent. Young, tall, lean, dressed in furs and beads. His face wasn't painted. No war cries, no threat in his stance. Just stillness. He looked at each sister, his eyes lingering longest on Clara. She met his gaze, ready to strike with whatever she could find. A bone. A stone. Her own hands. He knelt, pulled something from his satchel, a bundle of dried meat, and something that smelled like sweetgrass. He placed it gently in front of Lucy, then rose and left without a word. Beth stared at the food. Is it poisoned? I don't think so, Clara muttered. Outside, someone screamed. The wind picked it up and carried it off like a ghost. The sisters huddled together. For warmth, for comfort, for lack of anything else. The next morning, they were brought before the chief. He sat cross-legged near a massive fire surrounded by men with long hair and feathered spears. The wolf-pelt man. He watched Clara like he already knew her soul. An elder spoke in Cheyenne. Then a trader stepped forward, white, with skin like leather, and a voice soaked in whiskey. The chief says you are his captives now. No ransom, no release. Beth began to cry. The trader added, He calls you gifts from the winter spirits. Says you'll stay. Clara stepped forward. Tell him I'll see him dead before he lays a hand on any of us. The trader just chuckled. You got fire, girl, that's good, you'll need it. The chief stood and crossed to Clara. He didn't speak, just looked at her, then placed a feather in her hair, claiming her. Clara slapped his hand away. The men tensed, spears lifted, but the chief just laughed. The man from the tent, the quiet one, stepped between them and muttered something low and hard. The chief's expression flickered, then he nodded. The trader leaned in. That one's his son, says he wants to watch over you. Clara didn't look away. I don't need watching. The trader grinned. Don't matter. You got it anyway. As they were dragged back toward the tent, snow began to fall again. Thick, heavy, the kind that blankets the world until it forgets what lies beneath. Inside, Clara sat in silence, her mind a firestorm. They weren't dead. That meant they were wanted for something else, and that meant escape was still possible. She would bide her time, watch, wait, and when the snow let up, she'd make them all regret letting her live. The cold was no longer just a sensation. It had become a thing that lived inside Clara, coiled tight in her spine, pressing into her lungs with every breath. The tent's stitched seams held back the wind, but not the fear. That seeped through everything. Lucy lay curled beneath a bison pelt, her cheeks flushed red and too warm. Her breath came fast, shallow. Beth dabbed her sister's forehead with the last clean cloth they had. She's burning up. Clara crouched beside them, fists clenched. It's the cold. And whatever she ate, she barely touched it, Beth whispered. She's 16, Beth, and she's never slept on snow-packed dirt. Outside, voices spoke in Cheyenne, low and steady. Fire cracked. Horses whickered. But none of it felt real. They were ghosts drifting through someone else's world uninvited. The tent flap stirred. Clara stood fast, eyes hard. It was him again, the chief's son. He entered without speaking, eyes sweeping the interior. His hands held something, a bundle of herbs, wrapped tight in deer hide. Clara stepped between him and Lucy. What is that? He raised it, careful, slow. He crouched beside Lucy, unwrapped the herbs and crushed them in his palm. The air filled with a bitter scent, pine and something pungent. Clara flinched. You think I'm going to let you touch her? He met her eyes. Calm. Then turned to Beth, offered the herbs wordlessly. Beth hesitated. Do it, Clara said through her teeth. But if she gets worse? The man stood, his face unreadable, and stepped back into the snow. They brewed the herbs in a dented tin cup over a sputtering fire. Lucy drank it with a grimace before fading into a restless sleep. That night, Clara sat awake, her rifle long gone, her knife still hidden in her boot. Her eyes flicked between the tent flap and her sister's. She didn't trust him, didn't trust any of them. And yet he'd brought medicine. She remembered the way he'd looked at her, not with hunger like the others, but with something else. Something close to guilt. In the dark, Clara whispered, Why didn't they kill us? Beth shifted. I think we're a message. To who? I don't know. Silence pressed in again. When morning came, Lucy was breathing easier. They were allowed to leave the tent. Not far, just to a clearing near the river's edge, where a fire burned low and a woman stirred a thick broth. Children watched them, with wide eyes. Some laughed, others didn't. Clara noticed the absence of women their age. None between child and mother. Only them. They sat on logs beneath an overhang of pine boughs. A guard stood a few feet away, chewing on a strip of meat. Another walked slow circles, keeping eyes on everything. Then he returned, the chief's son. Alone again. He carried a bow slung across his back and wore a short buffalo coat over layered buckskin. He moved like the cold didn't touch him. He knelt by the fire without a word. Pulled out flint, struck sparks. The flame rose with a hiss. Beth murmured, "He's not like the others." Clara didn't reply. He glanced at her, then pointed at the bow across his back. Son. Ka, he said. She frowned. "Is that your name?" He nodded once, then pointed to her. She scowled. "Clara?" He repeated it soft. "Clara?" Beth smiled faintly. "It suits him, doesn't it?" Clara stood. "We're not here to play house." Tasunka didn't react. He simply turned, rose, and walked back toward the trees, vanishing like mist. Later, Clara wandered to the edge of the camp where the snow lay deeper. Warriors trained there, moving in silence, weapons flashing. Discipline. Order. Every step calculated. She studied them until Tasunka appeared beside her again. "Why do you help us?" she asked, her voice low. He didn't answer. She turned toward him. "You're the chief's son. You ride with raiders. Yet you bring herbs, start fires. You're different." Tasunka looked toward the mountains, then tapped his chest with 2 fingers. "Before," he said. She tilted her head. "Before. What?" He tapped again. "War." Then slowly he pointed to his temple. "Dream." Clara's breath caught. "You dream of peace?" He nodded. She didn't speak for a while. That night, a scream tore through the camp. A settler man, wounded, bound, was dragged before the fire circle. Clara saw him from the tent's shadow. His face bloodied, recognizable. Beth gasped. Mr. Holloway from the wagon train. Clara watched as the chief raised his hand and brought it down. The man's scream stopped. Beth turned away, shaking. Clara didn't move. She memorized the chief's face. She imagined her fingers around his throat. Back in the tent, Lucy whispered, "They'll do the same to us, won't they?" "No," Clara said, eyes glowing with something close to fury. "We won't let them." Lucy said nothing, but she didn't look convinced. The next morning, the wind howled again. A blizzard rolled in from the west. The air turned white, the world a blur of snow and breath. Inside the tent, they shared the last of the dried meat. Beth held Lucy close. Clara paced. Tasunka entered again. This time, his face was hard, determined. He knelt, unwrapped a small bundle, a thin knife, a scrap of cloth, a flintstone. He looked at Clara, then at the flap. Clara's eyes narrowed. "What are you doing?" He held the knife out to her. She took it slow. Cold steel. Real. He placed 2 fingers on his lips, then pointed to the tent wall. "Night," he said. Her heart pounded. "You're helping us escape?" He didn't answer, just nodded once and slipped out into the snow. Clara stared at the knife, then at her sisters. Beth's eyes were wide. "Do you trust him?" "No," Clara said. But she didn't put the knife down. The moon hung low and swollen, casting a pale sheen over the snow-laced valley. Everything looked carved from bone, silent, sharp, breathless. Clara crouched by the tent flap, the knife Tasunka had given her tight in her hand. Her breath fogged the air in thin, quick bursts. Behind her, Beth clutched Lucy close, whispering fragments of prayer. The guards were distracted. The storm had driven many to the main fires, and the few who remained moved slowly, hunched against the cold. The snow muffled all sound. It was the kind of night that erased tracks, covered sins, and swallowed the unwary. Clara touched Beth's shoulder. "We move now. Quiet." Beth nodded, face pale but steady. They slipped through the side of the tent, pushing past the stitched hide Clara had carefully loosened earlier. The cold slapped them instantly, a dagger against exposed skin. Lucy stumbled, but Clara caught her before she fell. They stayed low, crawling between shadows and snowdrifts. Smoke from dying fires coiled through the air, mingling with pine sap and ash. No dogs barked, no voices called. Near the edge of the camp, Clara paused. Her heart pounded so loud, she was certain it would give them away. Then, from the trees, Tazunka emerged. He wore no headdress, no war paint, just fur-lined leggings and a buffalo coat. His bow was slung over his back, quiver-light. He gave a single nod, then turned and melted into the woods. Clara followed. Beth and Lucy, trembling, came close behind. The forest swallowed them quickly, each step taking them further from firelight, deeper into the black silence of winter. An hour passed. Tazunka led them along a narrow game trail that wound through thick spruce and jagged boulders. The snow came up past their calves in places, but he moved with a grace that made Clara feel clumsy by comparison. Lucy coughed, a harsh rattling sound. Tazunka stopped. Clara tensed. Then, without speaking, he pulled a strip of hide from his belt and passed it to Lucy. Soft, worn, meant to muffle the sound. She took it with wide eyes. They moved again. Another hour. Then a sound, a crack of wood behind them. Tazunka spun, bow drawn in an instant. Clara pressed the girls behind a tree. From the darkness, hooves pounded snow. Shapes emerged. 4, maybe 5 riders. Silent. No war cries, no warning, just death coming fast. Tazunka loosed an arrow. One rider dropped with a grunt. Another swerved, crashing into a tree. Clara grabbed Beth and Lucy. "Run!" They tore through the snow, breath ragged, branches whipping their faces. Behind them, steel clashed with bone. A scream. Not Tazunka. He caught up moments later, blood on his sleeve, his bow broken. "This way," he growled, voice low and harsh. He led them down into a ravine, its edges sheer with ice. Clara hesitated. "We'll never get out again." Tazunka pointed to the far side. "Hide!" They slid down, half falling. At the bottom, surrounded by icy walls and tangled roots, they collapsed. Clara kept the knife close. Above them, voices called in Cheyenne. Searching, scattered. One rider passed within feet of their hiding place. Beth clapped a hand over Lucy's mouth. The horse snorted, shifted, then moved on. Minutes passed. Then, an hour. The wind whined down the ravine like a dying thing. Clara's limbs shook, not from cold but from exhaustion and tension stretched too tight. She turned to Tazunka. "You didn't have to fight them." He stared ahead. "They would have killed you. Then they'll kill you too." He didn't deny it. Beth leaned forward, voice soft. "Why risk everything for us?" Tazunka looked at her, then at Clara. "Because this war, it eats everything." Silence followed. They climbed out at dawn, the sky stained rose and steel. They crossed a frozen creek, frost crunching beneath their boots. Clara's feet were bleeding, her fingers numb. Lucy stumbled with every third step. Then they found it. A hunting cabin, long abandoned. The roof sagged, and snow drifted through. A broken window, but it was shelter. They got a fire going with Tazunka's flint and scavenged dry pine from under the eaves. Beth cooked the last of the dried meat. Clara melted snow for water. For a moment they just sat, silent, breathing. Clara finally spoke. "This doesn't mean we're safe." Tazunka nodded. "He will come." "Your father?" "Yes." Clara stood, hands clenched. "Then we fight." Tasunka looked at her, something unreadable in his gaze. You're not like the others. She didn't flinch. Neither are you. That night, as the fire crackled low, he told her how he once dreamed of leading his people into peace, how his mother had taught him both English and Cheyenne, how she died in a settler raid 2 winters ago. After that, his father only knew war. I followed him because I was angry, he said. But your fire reminds me who I used to be. Clara met his eyes. And what am I? Someone who would walk through fire for her sisters. She didn't smile, but she didn't look away. Outside, snow began to fall again. Inside, a fire burned, small, defiant, warm. They all fell asleep eventually, wrapped in borrowed furs, and silence. But Clara kept the knife in her hand, just in case. The sky was iron gray when Clara awoke, a heavy silence hanging over the world like a warning. Frost clung to the windows of the old hunting cabin, thick enough to turn everything beyond into a blur of white and shadow. The fire had died sometime during the night. Beside her, Lucy snored softly, color finally returning to her cheeks. Beth stirred under the heavy buffalo hide, murmuring fragments of a dream. Tasunka stood at the window, motionless. Clara sat up, slowly, muscles aching from cold and tension. What is it? He didn't look away. Smoke, horses. She joined him, peering through a crack in the frost. A dark plume drifted in the distance, curling above the trees like a snake waking from slumber. Below it, movement, dark shapes growing closer. Her stomach turned to stone. Beth knelt by the fire pit, reigniting the embers. How many? Tasunka spoke without hesitation. Too many. Clara turned to him. We can't outrun them. No, she gripped the knife, now more a part of her hand than any tool. Then we stand. Tasunka gave a single nod. There is high ground. To the east. We hold them there. Beth helped Lucy up, wrapping her in extra hides. The girl's face was drawn, but determined. They moved quickly, collecting the little they had. Blankets, the flintstone, Clara's antler-handled knife. Tasunka gave Clara a war club carved from ash wood and wrapped in rawhide. It is balanced, fast, you'll need it. They climbed to the ridge as the wind picked up, tearing through the trees like a pack of wolves. The snow burned their faces, whipped hair into their eyes. At the top of the ridge stood a stone outcrop, overlooking the narrow pass below. It was the only way through the forest without descending into steep ravines. Tasunka crouched behind a fallen pine. They will come through there, bottleneck. We can hold them briefly. Clara crouched beside him, war club in hand. We only need enough time. For the girls. Beth hid Lucy behind the rocks and loaded a pistol she'd taken from one of the fallen raiders during their escape. Her hands shook, but her eyes were clear. Snow began to fall again. Thick, blinding, heavy. The wind howled louder, drowning thought. And then, through the veil of white, they came. The Cheyenne warriors moved like wraiths, weapons drawn, eyes sharp. The chief led them, face painted red and black, mounted atop a massive gray horse. When he saw his son on the ridge, standing, beside the women, his face twisted into something ancient and feral. He raised his hand, arrows flew. Clara ducked, heart pounding, as one lodged into the tree inches from her head. She rose and hurled the war club, striking a rider in the chest. He collapsed with a grunt. Tasunka shouted something in Cheyenne, a command, a plea. The warriors hesitated, but the chief roared back, and they surged forward. The world turned chaos. Clara swung and struck, her breath ragged, her body moving on instinct. Beth fired the pistol, then again. Tasunka fought with blade and fist, moving like fire through the snow. A warrior grabbed Clara's arm. She drove her elbow into his throat. He fell. She turned in time to see the chief charging up the ridge, spear raised. Tasunka stepped forward, blocking him. You don't have to do this, he shouted. His father's reply was a snarl. You choose them over your blood? I choose peace. They clashed. The spear thrust. Tasunka dodged, drew a blade from his belt, and they fought, father and son, beneath the screaming wind. Clara tried to move to help, but another warrior grabbed her from behind. She kicked backward, stomped his foot, drove her knife into his thigh. He fell, shrieking. Beth ran out of bullets. Lucy screamed. Tasunka's blade clashed with his father's again, sparks flying from stone and steel. Then the chief struck low, sweeping Tasunka's legs from under him. The spear tip rose, aimed at his throat. No. Clara lunged, war club swinging wide. It hit the chief's side with a crack. He staggered. Tasunka rose and drove his blade into his father's side. Deep. The chief gasped, eyes wide, and then collapsed into the snow without a word. The remaining warriors froze. One by one, they lowered their weapons, then turned and vanished back into the trees. Silence returned. Tasunka fell to one knee, blood staining the snow from a wound in his shoulder. Clara caught him. "Stay with me." He met her eyes. "You fight like fire." She held his face in her hands. "You're bleeding." Beth tore cloth from her dress, pressing it to his wound. Lucy staggered to her feet and wrapped her arms around Clara's waist. They remained there until the wind softened, until the snow quieted, until the world seemed to breathe again. By evening, the fire crackled inside the cabin once more. Tasunka slept, wounds bound, his breathing steady. Clara sat beside him, watching the flames. Beth combed Lucy's hair, humming, a lullaby their mother used to sing. The melody rose and fell like memory. Clara spoke softly. "He saved us." Over and over, Beth nodded. "You saved each other." Spring came late to that corner of the world, but when it came, it found 3 settler sisters still alive, and a warrior who had turned his back on war. They built their home in that valley. A small cabin, a garden, a life between 2 worlds. One morning, under the thawing sky, Clara stood beside Tasunka. No priest, no preacher. Just Beth and Lucy. Just snow melting from the trees. She took his hand. He said only 3 words. "My heart, yours." She whispered back, "All of me." Later that year, Beth wore a dress of blue calico and wed him too. Then Lucy, once recovered, made her choice in quiet certainty. She had never needed words to be brave. They were no longer just sisters. They were wives. They were survivors. And the wind that once tried to kill them now sang their story through the valley. Wild, bitter, beautiful. In the West, legends are not always written with ink. Sometimes they are carved in frost and kept warm by fire.